Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la la la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la la ya la la la. Ya la la ya la la la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la la la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. מה טובו עליך יעקב, עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו עליך יעקב, עליך יעקב, משכנותיך
Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to our Shabbat morning service. We're coming to you from our beautiful sanctuary. As always, you can find the link to the prayer book pages PDF for the service in the comments. Important information will also appear in the comments during the service, and for that we thank Dave Zucker, Riley Hendricksey, and Aviva Simons who are managing our streaming. Please say hi if you are watching by typing Shabbat Shalom in the comments line, and don't forget to click enter or return. Just a reminder about the page numbers. If you have two sets, we're calling the numbers in the brackets. So go ahead and find Shabbat morning service Roman numeral number 2 in your Mishkan Tfilah, or simply the second page now of your prayer packet. If you're following on the PDF, we're using all the pages. If you have any technical issues and you need help, we'll ask you that you text our technical support line is 913-303-1134. And if you have any feedback about this service, we suggest that you take some notes and send us an email during the week. We'd love to hear your comments. Thank you in advance, and Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Our service will continue as we gather together on this Shabbat, and we thank God for having restored our souls in mercy to this moment by singing together Mode Ani on page 288. We continue together on page 291. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware we would lack the strength to sustain life before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh chol basar umafli na'as.
Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata b'tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata
Our service continues on page 293 as we recite together the blessings for our daily miracles. Nisim B'chol Yom 293.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'chvivina lechachvin ben yom uven laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivri.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kfufim.
Amen. Baruch אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, רוקח הארץ על המים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המכין מצעדי גבר.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, מלביש ארומים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן ליהב כוח.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המעביר שינה מעיני ותנומה מעפעפי.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בצלם אלוהים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בת חורים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני ישראל.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורך.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוטר ישראל בתפארה.
Amen.
We continue together in the middle of page 302 as we sing a section from Psalm 92, a psalm, a song for Shabbat, beginning with the words Tzadik Katamar.
Tzadik katamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon, balvanon yizkeh, shetulim bebeit Adonai, mechatzot Eloheinu yafrichu, od yanun beseva, yesheni merananim yhiu, lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatavo.
Page 306, we join together in singing the words from Psalm 150, Hallelujah.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia.
On page 317, we prepare for the recitation of the Shema, which will be on page 318. And we begin with the blessing before the recitation of the Shema on page 317. And reminder to everybody that this week's Torah portion, Va'et Hanan, contains the words that we recite regularly as part of the Shema and Ve'ahavta.
I always find that very exciting when that comes around. It happens every year, and yet every year I am very excited every time.
O God, inspiration and guide for all you have spoken in 1,000 tongues for us to hear in every land and every age. Your children have heard you and imagined you in separate ways, and yet, O God, you are one unifier of humanity. We give thanks for the sages and teachers who bring us understanding of your will. Gratefully, we recall the lawgivers and prophets, the psalmists and sages of Israel, and joyfully we remember that from the dawn of Israel's life, we would turn to you and find purpose. May the teachings of our ancestors live on in our minds, and their passion for righteousness stir our hearts. Help us to live so that our daily conduct reveals the beauty and wisdom of your truth.
Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לעולכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
On page 322, we continue together with Mi Chamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדב הקודש, נולדתי לו עושה פלא, עושה פלא. שירה חדשה שיפרו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים.
We come to this moment in our service when we take time, each of us, to pray silently. We can follow our prayer book through page 337 through the Amidah. We can also use this time for private meditation and private prayers. We begin on page 322 with Tzur Israel.
Tzur Israel, אומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדנו מאוד יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. נצחים ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. בשבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול, כי אל מלך גדול, וקדוש אתה לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש.
We continue now with the service for the reading of the Torah. It begins on page 367 with Romemu. Please look in our comments line. You will find a link to the Torah reading for this morning. It was also in the e-news that you received yesterday morning. Please join us, Romemu, on page 367. On this Shabbat, we read one of the perhaps most famous Torah portions. Famous because, as I mentioned last night, it contains the Shema, and we talked a little bit about that during our time together on night of Shabbat. But it also contains the second version of the Ten Commandments. But we are actually not going to read any of that because we are trying to follow the triennial cycle, which means that we actually read the very beginning of the Torah portion. And this is also a way for all of us to be exposed to sections of these Torah portions that we may not otherwise read or pay attention to. And that is because, of course, if you have a Torah portion that has the Shema and the Ten Commandments, I mean, that probably takes center stage, right? But not today. So the Torah portion is called Va'et Hanan, and it means I pleaded, meaning Moses pleaded with God. And this is one last chance or moment in which Moses asks God to let him go into the land of Israel. And God says, Rav Lecha. We've seen this phrase many times when they want to stop the discussion altogether. He said, enough is enough, you're not going to go in. And then talks a little bit about, we will read it together, what happened and why God does not allow Moses to go in. Then he moves into chapter 4, and we're reading this section slightly longer today because I wanted to get to this part in the chapter 4 because it contains two very famous phrases. And I know when it comes from my mouth, when I say famous, it's just like, well, famous. I mean, for whom?
Famous
but
to whom?
Actually, these are fairly famous. One of them is not in our Siddur anymore. The Reform movement took it out. But in most other synagogues, before the reading of the Torah, you will hear these words recited, which is, Ve'atem hadveikim ba'Adonai Eloheichem chaim kulchem ayom. Which means, while you who held fast to Adonai, your God, are all alive today. Remember, this is all in reference to the story of those who went into some kind of rebellion during the 40 years previous to this point. And so obviously the ones who are alive there is talking about the remnants of those who survived the 40 years trek through the desert. But that's not how it's usually recited, meaning when it says Ve'atem hadveikim, mean those in the congregation who are here to hear the words of Torah. And it's usually chanted Ve'atem hadveikim b'Adonai Eloheichem chaim kulchem hayom. So, and then the Torah reading begins. But it comes from this week's Torah portion. And the second one is, I think, one of the verses from the Torah that we in the Reform movement, and I think most people who are not Orthodox, and I may have to qualify that a little bit because the rabbis found a way around this text, may have a little bit of problem. And it is verse 2, and Moses says, talks to, the people and says, here I give you these instructions and you may live and occupy the land. And here is the famous verse. You shall not add anything to what I command you. Lo tosifu al hadavar asher anochi metzaveh etchem velo tigreu mimenu, nor shall you take anything away from it. You have to keep absolutely everything as is written. Now, you probably are people who are watching who have seen that a lot of the things that are in the Torah we no longer do as Jews. So how is one to understand this particular text? Lo tosifu velo tigreu. And this is how it's usually quoted. You shall not add or subtract anything. It seems, to me at least, that Moses had made a decision that I am not going to go into the land of Israel with you, but I warn you, I'm not going to be there, but do not dare to take one thing out of this or to add anything. It's like, he's really wanted to extend his reach into the land of Israel, despite the fact that he's not going to be able to go there. So, to me, in context, it could be very easily understood as a wish on the part of Moses to go beyond what his lifespan will be.
Like his legacy?
Like his legacy, know. And I think that we all, maybe not admittedly, have that wish. It's like, I've done it this way. Don't change it when I'm gone.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I'm so guilty of that.
This is the right way things are done. And when I'm gone, don't change it, don't add anything, don't subtract anything, because this is the right way. There's no other way. But of course, this is Moses, right? So he actually, it's God and then Moses. So if he says it, it has more weight than if we just say it to our descendants, I suppose. But I think it's part of human nature to want to perpetuate your legacy. But this particular text has given our tradition a lot of trouble. Because imagine, rationally, there is absolutely no way that something that was promulgated in the desert will last for thousands of years without any changes whatsoever. Especially because Jewish life changed. When we had the temple standing in Jerusalem, and we just commemorated the destruction of both temples on Tisha B'Av, at that time, there were a lot of things that the Torah says that we could do, and then we cannot do anymore. So if we cannot do them, is that subtracting? Is that taking things away? How could you keep up with this? So the Talmud and the rabbis had sort of a strategy to go about this, which is the strategy that I think we're all familiar with. But basically is, although circumstances changed, they found a way to legitimate the necessary expansion and evolution of Jewish law. And the Etz Chaim commentary says, the sages limited this prohibition to quantitative changes, meaning like adding a fourth petition to their priestly benediction. So for instance, we do the priestly benediction, Yevarechecha, it has 3.
Yes.
So don't add a fourth one to that one.
Gotcha.
Right? Or don't add a fourth passage to the tefillin, or to the mezuzah, don't add things there. So extension and clarifications of things were never considered part of this. It's not a violation of the prohibition, lo tosifu, don't add anything. And on the other hand, subtraction also worked this way. that you wouldn't take something away. Let's say, all right, this year I'm going to celebrate 6 days of Pesach, all right? or Hanukkah is going to last 5 nights because, whatever reason you had. So, although, granted, Hanukkah is not in the Torah, I understand.
But it's a good example.
It's a good example.
Mathematically.
So, adding and subtracting was taken literally. In other words, things that are counted don't add anything, and on things that are counted don't subtract anything.
Okay.
In the Middle Ages, they came up with this idea from the rabbis. In particular, there were 613 mitzvot. They say, don't make it 615, don't make it 611. The list varies of which ones are the 613, but 613 is a number, so don't add or subtract. This, of course, did not apply to interpretations of the Torah. You all probably are familiar with lighting Shabbat candles. If you can show me where in the Torah it says that you should light candles on Shabbat, I'll be glad to take a look at it. That's a challenge. You're not going to find it. It doesn't say you should light. It does say you should eat matzah on Pesach, but it does not say you should light a Shabbat candle. Actually, it says, "Lo teba'u esh b'chol mashrotechem." You shall not light a fire on your dwelling places on Shabbat. So it actually says the opposite. Well, we're not lighting the candles on Shabbat before Shabbat, but anyway. So that, because it was not a number question, it's not considered an additional thing.
Gotcha.
So I think that it's a possible way to go around. The reality has been, though, that we in the Reform movement have pretty much ignored this particular saying. Because early on in the Reform movement, this was quoted left and right to the early reformers. You are violating the lo tosifu, or you are violating the lo tigreu commandment as appears in the Torah. And we actually changed things because we took into consideration other traditions, not traditions, but other modern interpretations and things like that. In conservative Judaism, they see this slightly different, but I think that both the conservative and all the non-Orthodox movements, I think, have found a way to contextualize this saying by Moses, and then, therefore, is not something that we all follow. But I want to go back to my initial thought, and to me, it's really more about Moses' legacy at this point in his life, and is his attempt to perpetuate, so to speak, his own legacy, which he actually succeeded most of the time, especially in the generations right after.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to see what would happen 2,000-3,000 years later. And so Judaism, thank God, thank God we did not pay attention to Moses. And that's the other piece. With this, I'm going to finish. This is Moses saying it.
Right.
So we can get around it a little bit easier because it's not God saying, do not change anything, don't add anything. It's Moses who's saying it. So God gave us our intellect, and with that, we can actually interpret some of these things and be able to then make Judaism relevant for us on a daily basis.
As a woman, I'm especially glad we've made those choices.
Well, there are many, exactly. So there are many, many areas in which subtracting, in particular, taking things away that we find no longer applicable today, have really been beneficial to all of us. And also the idea, I think one of the commentators says, if you add or make things so difficult, here's the Maggid of Dubno says, sometimes adding leads to diminishing. If we demand too much, people may be driven to stop observing even what they currently do.
Right.
And so if things start to be so in contradiction to our values today, then we will have the opposite effect in many people. And we want you to be part of Jewish life as much as you can, and that we can make it happen for you. So the reading of the Torah is from the book of Deuteronomy. We are reading chapter 3, verses 23 to chapter 4, verses 4. And this is another interesting aside, like a sidebar, that this is a case in which the Torah portion does not start at the beginning of a chapter. It starts in chapter 3, verse 23, which is like, what's going on here? Well, because the number of chapters and verses were done by a Christian theologian, not by Jews, so they didn't pay any attention to what the Torah portions were at all. So, but this is the system we use for everybody to be able to find it. So the blessings are found on page 369. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You have enlightened this path with the wisdom of Torah, giving it to the Jewish people as their particular way. Blessed are you, merciful One, who gives this Torah to the Jewish people. Amen. Va'et Hanan el Adonai betahi lemor. Adonai Elohim, ata hachilota. להראות את עבדך ואת גודלך ואת ידך החזקה אשר מאל בשמיים ובארץ אשר יעשכם מעשיך וכי גבורותיך אברהם ואראה את הארץ הטובה אשר בעבר הירדן ההר הטוב הזה והלבנון ויתבר אדוני בי למענכם ולא שמע אלי ויאמר אדוני אלי רב לך אל תוסף דבר אלי עוד ודבר זה על ראש הפסגה וזה עיניך ימה וצפונה ותימנה ומזרחה וראה ועיניך כי לא תעבור את הירדן הזה וצב את יהושע וחזקהו באמצעהו כי הוא יעבור לפני העם הזה והוא ינחיל אותם ואת הארץ אשר תראה ונשב בגיא מול בית פאור ואתה ישראל שמע אל החוקים ואת אל המשפטים אשר אנוכי מלמד אתכם לעשות למען תחיו ובאתם וירשתם את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם נותן לכם לא תוסיפו על הדבר אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם ולא תגרו ממנו לשמור ואת מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם אשר אנוכי מצווכם היום עיניכם הראות את אשר עשה אדוני בבעל פאור כי כל האיש אשר הלך אחרי בעל פאור ישמידו אדוני אלוהיך מקרבך ואתם הדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום. I pleaded with Adonai at that time saying, O Adonai God, you who let your servants see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hands, you whose powerful deeds no God in heaven and on earth can equal, let me, I pray, cross over and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon. But Adonai was wrathful and with me, and you on your account, and would not listen to me. Adonai said to me, enough, raf lecha, never speak to me of this matter again. Go up to the summit of Pisgah and gaze about, to the west, to the north, the south, and the east. Look at it all well, for you shall not go across yonder Jordan. Give Joshua his instructions and imbue him with strength and courage, for he shall go across at the head of this people, and he shall allot to them the land that you may only see. Meanwhile, we stayed on in the valley near Beth Peor. And now, O Israel, Shema, listen, give heed to the laws and rules that I instruct you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that Adonai, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add anything to what I command you, or take anything away from it, but keep the commandments of Adonai your God that I enjoin upon you. You saw with your own eyes that Adonai did in the matter of Baal Peor, that Adonai your God wiped out from among you every person who followed Baal Peor, while you, who held fast to Adonai your God, are all alive today. Alternative blessings after the reading of the Torah are on page 369. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. This Torah is a teaching of truth, whole and balanced, and from it comes eternal life. For the people who embrace it, blessed are you, O merciful One, who gives this Torah to the Jewish people. Now, as we gather on this Shabbat, we offer a prayer for those in need of healing. You might have access to the Misheberach list through the e-news that you received yesterday. You can also follow the link in the comments. But if you'd like to offer other names, please type them in the comments so we can all see them. Please go ahead and begin typing. We think of those in need of healing. We also offer a prayer for those who help in healing, health workers and first responders all over the world during this pandemic. May the one who blessed and led our forebears give countenance unto those who provide help for the ill and troubled among us. May they be filled with fortitude and courage, endowed with sympathy and compassion, as they give strength to those at their side. May they fight against despair and continue to find within themselves the will to reach out to those in need. And in their love of others, may they feel the blessing of community and the blessing of renewed faith.
With the
We conclude the service for the reading of the Torah on page 374 with Etz Chaim. As we prepare for our moment of remembrance, we turn to page 593 as we share a meditation together. In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision and grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death, all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair. In God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirit of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love are we comforted. O life of our life, soul of our souls, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. We now think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us. We have heard of the passing of Issy Auser, husband of Leslie Auser, and father-in-law of Stephanie and Adam Eliashar, and grandfather of Jonah and Sarah. And we are observing the Shiva period for Monica Kitt, mother and mother-in-law of Jeffrey and Barbara Kitt, and grandmother of Alexa and Sydney. And the Shloshim for Judith Phyllis Fremerman, aunt of Paula Fremerman, Radine Shaw, mother and mother-in-law of Roseanne and Randy Deitch, and Irma Schneiderson, stepmother and stepmother-in-law of Mark and Regan Schneiderson, and step-grandmother of Carly and Beth. And on this Shabbat, if you're joining us and I remember a loved one and you're visiting, you would like to share a name, please do so by typing their names on our comments. We observe the yortsides of the following members of our congregation: Sylvia Becker, Esther Belmont, Sylvia Sue Carter, Ruth Deitch, Helen Gilman, Nathan Krasnopoler, Elena Kucherovsky, Emil Kuhn, Gertrude Levy, Leona Morgenstern, Bernard Sherman, Anna Stein, Sarah Zubatsky. Zichronam livracha, may the memories be for a blessing. We join together on page 598 for Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בכון ובמכון, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דא אמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Before we part, a few announcements. We would like to thank everyone who has joined us from our area and from around the world. Special thanks to Leslie here on my right, Leslie Zucker, for beautiful music, and to Dave Zucker, Riley Hendricksy, and Aviva Simons for helping our congregation have a virtual presence. Just a reminder that we are now open during regular office hours, but you must make an appointment with a member of our staff to be let into the building. And of course, our staff can still be reached by calling our office during regular business hours. Our next Facebook Live Shabbat service will be held on Friday, August 7th at 6:30 p.m. If you'd like to join us for Torah study, our Sichat Shabbat will take place next Saturday at 9 a.m. on Zoom. We are collecting hygiene items to donate to Calvary Community Outreach Network. The staff and members of the board will be receiving your contactless donations tomorrow morning. And it's going to be a beautiful day.
Yes.
Outside the building. The drive-by, say hi, and do a mitzvah. Check your e-news if you need a reminder of the items that we are collecting. Also, please sign up for Beth Torah's first ever virtual blood drive. Though we cannot yet safely host our annual blood drive in our building, Sharon Altman continues to find ways for Beth Torah to contribute as a community. Thank you, Sharon. Please check your e-news for details on how to donate. It begins on August 5th.
You know what else happens on August 5th? Our next song session. We are back for our song session Wednesday at 7 o'clock on the Facebook Live. And then leading up to the High Holy Days, we will come together over the screen every Thursday night to engage in meaningful conversation and intentional activities. Our next offering, which is our second one, is Back to Shul Considerations and Concerns, which basically is looking at what the medical community is saying and finding balance with that and the needs of our community and our congregation. So you can find this in the e-news. There's a Zoom link, and it's Thursday, August 6th at 7 p.m.
Thank you very much. And I hear that we may have, at the end of August, another outdoor service on Friday night.
I think that that's fantastic because August in the
weather
Midwest.
should be just like this.
Oh, I
72
love it.
degrees, a very light breeze.
I think it'll be fun.
It would be. Please make sure you check us out on Facebook. You like our pages and follow our pages so you can leave us comments there too. And you will be able to also see updates. And when we go live and things like that, you'll be able to see that. Because of the Shema and the Hafta being included in this week's Torah portion, Ve'et Hanan, we conclude today with a melody written by Debbie Friedman based on a translation of the words of the Ve'hafta. And You Shall Love is on the last page of your PDF for the service.
And you shall love Adonai, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And all these words which I command you on this day shall be in your heart, shall be in your heart. And God.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Stay healthy out there.
Shabbat shalom. Mwah. Take care of each other.